A chef's table floating on the open seas. Fish tacos on the shores of Alaska. Coffee and cod and crackheads in Seattle. Breathtaking views, a breathtakingly terrible cruise ship comedian, a dancing avocado, and all things insane in between. And it all starts right now. The waters of the Pacific lap rhythmically against the unfathomable behemoth of steel, flesh, and pina colada mix that comprises one of the largest passenger cruise ships in the world. And inside this orgy of tourist insanity, among the more than 4,000 other brain-dead travelers who can just barely be considered sentient life, sits I, at a table in one of its many amazingly mediocre restaurants, staring in disbelief at what has just been placed before me. It is a menu for this evening's dinner, and on one of its pages I read what can only be described as absurdity incarnate, as my eyes fall upon the words, "Fresh-caught Atlantic salmon." Did I mention this was on a boat that was floating in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? I'm sure I did. A boat which, one day prior, cast off from the shores of Washington, both places where you would be hard-pressed to throw a rock without striking one of the freshest and best salmon in the entire world. But wait, let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself, because oh so much went into all this before reaching this culmination of culinary madness. Our plane touches down in a city that is not totally unfamiliar to me, and I step into the past in a state I once called home. A place where the fentanyl flows like wine, and many people walk the streets like there is a special gravity just for them that is actively dragging them down into the grave. A place where the well-to-do live in pristinely kept neighborhoods near gorgeous parks, while most people struggle to navigate the hell that the city desperately tries to keep civilized. The Arctic Club is a lavish, ornately designed sarcophagus of stained wood and Art Deco, carefully crafted to feel like stepping back into the 1920s. Feeling parched, I grab a bottle of water and a can of Diet Coke from the lobby fridge, and they hand me a bill for $13, so fuck them. But to be fair, it is a stunningly lavish, gorgeous luxury hotel, and for the next couple days we were treated to one of the most fabulous complimentary hotel breakfasts you're likely to find. Fresh, locally sourced pastries and croissants, fluffy scrambled eggs and some unbelievable breakfast sausages, and of course, lots of green hot sauce. Oh, and for good measure, the unreasonably high-quality coffee you would expect in Seattle. But I'd have to be an absolute tit if I only ate hotel food during my travels, so let's get out into the city and see what we can scrounge up. If you're a regular viewer to this channel, then you'll know that my languishing in the American Deep South, despite its hidden treasures and excellent barbecue, has left me positively parched for a good bowl of poke. And boy did I find it at FOB, a micro chain with 3 locations in the Seattle area that I'm assuming stands for Fall Out Boy, since I can't be bothered to look it up. A poke bowl is essentially a bowl of everything I love. Rice, freshly caught fish from the Pacific Northwest, slices of ginger, scallion, cucumber, crispy garlic, sesame oil, and sriracha aioli. But what sent this bowl over the top was something I don't think I'd ever had, but I'll be sure to remember: pickled daikon. This bowl was poetic splendor, and hot damn do I miss having regular access to poke bowls. The Pacific Northwest, if you happen to not know, has a substantial Asian American population, and with it a vibrant section of town that many call Chinatown, but that moniker fails to capture the true diversity of cultures and cuisines you'll find there. Cold soba noodles and banh mi on one block, ramen and Korean fried chicken on the next. But like a true Caucasian sucker, I always find myself drawn in by a window where various charred, crispy-skinned animals hang from hooks.
Mom, are those rabbits dead?
No, Lisa, they're just sleeping. Upside down and inside out.
Which is why we made our way to Cow Cow Barbecue and sampled the lunch special, along with a few other choice cuts. What I'd learned about places like these from previous ventures to other Chinatowns is that no matter how badly you want to try it, avoid the duck like the plague, because it will usually be inedible scraps of tendon and cartilage that you'll eventually give up on and push to the side. And from Cow Cow, I learned that the same can be said for pork spare ribs. Not very tender, mostly chew and sinew, not much meat. But the roast pork and garlic fried rice did the job, though the spicy scallion lo mein failed to register on the heat it had promised. Overall pretty good, but I left feeling like I hadn't come close to finding the best meal in this Asian enclave. We made our way down to the wharf, sat on a bench to people watch, and prepared ourselves for the main event. Not a tourist attraction or the food from any restaurant, but a reunion with some beloved family members we hadn't seen in years. The in-laws. And not the in-laws people in bad sitcoms joke about avoiding, but some of our truly favorite people. We met at the Fisherman's Restaurant, a nautically themed seafood spot overlooking the waters of the bay, to sample some of the greatest hits of overpriced tourist trap slop. I started with a cup of the New England clam chowder, a dish that I am extremely judgmental of, and it was, admittedly, better than many. It's a soup with a cream-based broth, but many kitchens overwork it to the point that it has the texture of a cappuccino. But this was nice, not too airy, well-seasoned, and herbaceous for good measure. But then the horror show begins. To contrast the creamy soup, I wanted some texture and ordered their version of fish and chips. And here is what arrived. 3 batons of crispy yet extremely overcooked cod, and a handful of extraordinarily bland fries. And if you're not angry yet, wait until I tell you that this pathetic pile of piss cost $22. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out that no one else in our party felt the same way about their food. So when I say that the Fisherman's Restaurant is a wallet-draining tourist trap, feel free to take that with a grain of salt. Much of the commentary about Seattle, prominently from people who've never been there, is that it's one big leftist experiment turned hellhole, rife with crime and drug addicts and poop on every corner. Well, allow me to set the record straight on what Seattle truly is. Because after doing what has always come natural to me, quietly observing the urban cityscape, I'm happy to report that Seattle is not the hippie-led zombified communist hellhole many claim it to be. In fact, it's a thriving neoliberal paradise, complete with all the latest left-wing innovations. Want to police your city but can't because the local anarchists insist you defund the police? Just station cops on every block, but replace the word police on their jackets with security. Have a population of fentanyl zombies caving in on themselves on the sidewalk everywhere you look? Just give them all taxpayer-funded wheelchairs so the living dead can sit, semi-conscious, their mouths agape, and limbs hanging like wilted vines in every street corner. I walked the streets of Seattle on what was maybe the 3rd proper vacation in my entire lifetime, feeling a strange amount of guilt for not working on a Wednesday afternoon. And what struck me most was the sheer volume of my sedentary peers. The young men on every block who apparently had nothing better to do than just meander, marinate inside an empty existence. I didn't feel endangered or distraught, just saddened. Saddened to see so many people lost. And I understood why many of them would inevitably choose the path of collapse. But more than anything, it made me appreciate the tranquility and quiet of my home for the past few years, much, much further to the south. The next morning, we awaken, bid farewell to the comfort of the Arctic Club, and prepare ourselves to enter madness incarnate, as the 4 of us, along with roughly 4,000 other souls, begin the long and arduous process of boarding a cruise ship bound for northern seas. If you've never gone through the process of boarding a cruise ship, imagine having a list of errands to run, only they all have to be done at a DMV owned by Disney. This includes waiting in a long line, only to show someone your ID, graduate to another line, and repeat the process multiple times. Wait to go through a metal detector and watch as a security guard confiscates an old man's cane and then scolds him for struggling to walk through the metal detector without his cane. It is the pinnacle of absurdist bureaucracy. Machinations designed to drip feed 4,000 people onto a boat so we don't overcrowd any of its services. And once you finally make it past the lines to lines and your 12th IDing, you are welcomed aboard to a cacophony of sales pitches. Because you may have paid thousands of dollars for passage aboard this floating circus, but that doesn't mean your wallet's been wrung dry just yet. Want to have signal on your phone? Why, you can use the ship's onboard internet for the next few days for the low price of just $800. And make sure you visit one of the many shops filled with the tackiest jewelry this side of the home shopping network before you settle into your room whose television plays 24-hour infomercials for those same jewelry stores. And sure, your passage may include an all-you-can-eat buffet that's been picked over by hundreds of filthy-handed children, but if you want anything beyond mediocrity and the norovirus, agents are waiting to book you a reservation at the ship's many restaurants. They're the first people you meet on board, gazing into your soul with a nervous desperation, like they're going to be beaten with a sock filled with nickels if you don't book a reservation at Jamie Oliver's Italian restaurant. Once we got settled into our room and spent a bit of time exploring the ship, we did what any spoiled tourists do: set off in search of something to eat. The complimentary dining room on board is a hybrid of banquet and restaurant service, where you choose from a predetermined selection of courses and are assigned a table and server each night of the cruise. We were seated by our host, who is Indian, greeted by our expediter, who is Indian, and had our drink orders taken by our server, who is also Indian. None of this is an indictment against them, India, or its people, but upon noticing this, a thought occurred to me. From my years working in restaurants as well as catering, I know firsthand that the more people you are cooking for, the worse the end product will be. Indian cuisine, however, is one of the few foods whose quality doesn't seem to dip when prepared en masse. In fact, it was designed to be enjoyed by many. Couple that with the substantially large presence of Indian people among the staff, led me to believe that maybe I should just have the curry. But oh, how wrong I was. And oh, how much it must have wounded the Indian servers to serve this disgrace to all things Indian, all things addictive, all things curry. Because curry, this was not. This was some godforsaken food management company's attempt to produce something that resembled curry, but would not cause harm to the palates of anyone, much less people with functioning taste buds. It was meat and vegetables hammered by heat until all flavor had abandoned them, swimming in a brown sauce as bland as the rice it was served with. I am so very sorry, my Indian waiter friends. But as frustratingly bad as bland curry can be, the night was about to get a whole lot worse. I could wax endlessly about bad food, bad service, and bad restaurants, but at the end of the day, it's just food. Minor transgressions against the natural order of good taste. But there are some things whose badness transcends the meaning of the word, into the territory of what's widely considered a crime against any basic sense of human decency. Things like violence, war crimes, and cruise ship comedians. And it was at this point in the evening that one in our party suggested we follow the disappointment of our meal by attending something so unspeakably awful that it made bland curry seem like the splendors of heaven in retrospect. The cruise ship's resident comedian. Now, maybe you think I'm the sort of respectful gentleman who wouldn't talk about this person by name, but you'd be wrong. Here he is. His name is Mike Pace, and he got his logo from Fiverr. His IMDb boasts a single appearance on an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm more than 20 years ago, not much else, and he is a horrifically, intolerably, unwatchable train wreck of a stand-up comic. A proud performer of such classics as Women Sure Do Love Shopping, Tourists Sure Are Dumb, and Kids Today, Am I Right? But he also does fresh new bits such as make up a dumb question that no one has ever asked him, and then rant and rave about how stupid that made-up person is, and periodically scream into the microphone, like Sam Kinison without any of the charm or talent. After walking out mid-show, the family member who suggested this profusely apologized, but I would hear none of it. Because if Mike Pace was just your average bad cruise ship comedian, I would have considered it a waste of time. This was an experience, like watching a drunk toddler trying to rebuild a carburetor, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. The next morning I woke up to stroll along the main outdoor deck, gaze upon the rolling seas, and sip coffee, meaning I would first have to obtain a hot cuppa from the ship's main restaurant, the floating bastion of insanity, the Windjammer. An all-you-can-eat buffet that makes the Golden Corral seem like a tool shed. But before I can even walk in, I am first greeted by the image of madness. Philosopher Immanuel Kant described the sublime as a sensation arising from simultaneous feelings of fascination and terror, from experiencing something that is both powerful yet utterly incomprehensible. I approach the entrance to the Windjammer and am greeted by a woman, An Asian woman who is exceedingly friendly in welcoming myself and other passengers to the restaurant, while simultaneously herding us over to a station to wash our hands before entering. These are all good things, as cruise ships are not unlike the world's biggest petri dish, and buffets are a magnet for contracting and sharing sickness. But, and I cannot overstress how ridiculous this seems in my half-asleep days, she is also wearing a giant foam outfit of an avocado. And on top of this, she is singing. She is singing Baby Shark, with her own lyrics. Wash your hands do 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 do, wash your hands do 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 do, wash your hands do 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 do. And I submit to you that not even Immanuel Kant could, in the confines of defining the sublime, find the words to describe a moment such as this. I snagged my coffee, my donut and croissant, and returned to the deck to enjoy. And while the coffee was enjoyable enough, the baked goods were shockingly bad. I'm talking a truly unenjoyable texture all around. But it served as a good lesson and summary of cruise ship food in general. This is not a Parisian cafe or even a donut shop. Whatever they make is for thousands of potential patrons. So even though they are cooking incomprehensibly massive amounts of food, the amount of attention paid to each item has to be minuscule. A donut or croissant dough is not being made before baked. They were made someplace else, some time ago, and placed out. And that's the buffet in general. Yes, it's massive. Yes, it looks visually impressive. No, it isn't good. It is a tidal wave of mediocrity from snout to tail, done with a focus on quantity, not quality, and presented by a very friendly but completely insane singing and dancing avocado. It's all just food, right? That is the argument made by those who see chefs dropping lemon tarts on tables, turning caprese salads into edible injections, or serving something called carrot air. But molecular gastronomy, the absurd intersection between art, food, and science, has been around longer than most people realize, and has even found its way aboard the cruise ship in the form of Wonderland, an Alice in Wonderland themed restaurant that plays on the many absurdities found once you've ventured down the rabbit hole. Our meal started with a selection of starters such as the deconstructed caprese salad, complete with a tomato that was, in fact, a gelée, made of, pepper, some dirt that tasted like basil, and what looks like a vegetarian cat's diarrhea. There was also an amuse-bouche called the liquid truffle mushroom risotto, which tasted like a musty potpourri also found in a litter box. Smoked deviled eggs topped with blue cheese and hot sauce. You get it? Because those are things you normally have with chicken wings, and these are unborn chickens. See? It's clever. They were tasty, but also came served over a packet of instant ramen that was left behind a radiator 7 years ago. There was also the crispy crab cone, which was also tasty, though I couldn't taste the crab because it had been bukkakied by avocado. Next came the main event, which for us meant a decent, albeit slightly under-rendered slab of pork belly, and a beef short rib with a selection of finger paints. And for dessert? These things. The sugar and fancy dress. Who cares? Now you might think I'm being harsh, but what I've conveniently left out of this ordeal and why I'm describing it with increasing levels of disdain is that dessert arrived somewhere past the 3-hour mark of the meal. At one point the manager came over to apologize for the excessive wait times, took our order for a complimentary round of drinks, and they never actually turned up. So as much as I appreciate the hard-working staff, the cooks, and everyone involved in making this absurdity a reality, it eventually reaches the point where the arrival of a diseased penis made out of sugar doesn't exactly save the evening, you know what I mean? Our next sampling of seafaring fine dining was Izumi, Royal Caribbean's attempt at Japanese for a pairing of sake and sushi. First, a sashimi kissed with aged olive oil and jalapeno that still somehow wasn't spicy at all, followed by a selection of rolls which contained an assortment of fish that were of extraordinary quality, but which were drowned out by accoutrements. Now, I'm not by any measure a sushi expert, and in fact I'm a well-documented sriracha mayo whore, but even to my own self-described low standards, this was a bit much, because a cardinal sin had been committed here, one which would be repeated several times on this boat: the sin of truffle oil. Truffle oil, for those who don't know, has never been in the same room, building, or even zip code as an actual truffle. It's an artificial flavoring, admittedly tasty with things like french fries, butter, or used sparingly with beef, but for fresh seafood, with all its subtlety and delicateness, it is wildly inappropriate. to the point that it taints, nay spoils the whole endeavor. Another day at sea, another morning standing on deck, watching the water and the people around me, but it was at this point that my attention mostly turned to the hundreds of employees scurrying about the ship. Every face fixed with a wide smile and a warm greeting. Every inch of the ship kept immaculate, as the thousands of us shuffle from one liquor oasis to the next. And at this point I wonder, what is their life like? I mean, imagine what you, the viewer, do when you get off work. Maybe you grab a beer and some drive-through, head home. Maybe you walk through the door to the smiles of a loving family. But imagine you get off work and you can't leave. You clock out for the day and take a staircase down to beneath your job, where a bed and maybe the uneaten food from a buffet awaits you. Imagine that life for a moment as our boat reaches its next port of call, Juneau, Alaska. There is a certain inauthenticity to the spaces surrounding where a cruise ship docks. A sort of filtered version of the area designed to extract as much money from tourists as humanly possible. I grew up in a town just like this, but I've never seen one so nakedly transparent as the one in Juneau, Alaska. "We love tourists," says the giant sign on a seafood restaurant. The town's main street is lined with shops selling even more jewelry, and each with an employee standing outside desperately trying to lure in passers-by in various Eastern European accents. We passed the docks and tourist traps and happened upon Deckhand Dave's Fish Tacos to sample some of the best fish tacos I've had in a minute. Crisp, battered morsels, expertly fried, yet not overpowering the taste of clean, freshly caught fish, and finished with refreshing herbs and vegetables to cleanse the palate. I also learned that apparently people are making hot sauces with kale, and they're pretty tasty. Deckhand Dave's was outstanding, and another reminder that the best food you'll find on a cruise is usually when you get off the boat. So we enjoyed these in return for our voyage to Canada. At this point you may be wondering, dear viewer, how does one fill their days on board what is essentially a floating mall that you kinda live in? And I'll tell you, because in addition to several pools, jewelry stores, and restaurants, there is a casino, more shops, and more bars. There's also bingo, which is mostly a chance for them to extract even more money from you, and an endless array of trivia, where hosts ask the audience questions and people pretend they aren't looking up the answers on their phone, so they can win a 5-cent keychain. And it is here that I want to tell you about the Canadian Mountie, one of the most surreal experiences of the entire trip. Our group is seated at a table waiting for the next scheduled game of bingo. We arrived early, very early in fact. So early that we were seated with cocktails in time to witness the event to transpire before bingo. And this wasn't trivia, a live musical performance, a comedian, or karaoke. It was a talk. Specifically, a lecture from an actual Canadian Mountie about the history of the Mounties and what they do. Listen to me, nothing else matters here, so I'm just going to jump ahead 20 minutes and paint a picture of what then transpired. Imagine you're sitting in an auditorium filled with hundreds of tourists, most of whom are nursing their 3rd or 5th cocktail of the day, waiting for bingo to begin. And at the center of all this is a stage, and on that stage, under festive lighting, is a man, softly sobbing into a microphone about his dead dog, and about how special the bond between a police dog and their handler truly is, how dogs know when their end is near and try their hardest to comfort those close to them. Did I mention this was a vacation? His talk also included other classic vacation hits like the psychological torment of having to unalive a suspect because they are trained to shoot to kill, and it can take days after an avalanche for authorities to recover your body because, and I quote, "the corpses freeze, which makes it harder for the dog to smell them, you know." Words fail me in expressing how totally insane this moment is. So here's an actual picture that was taken of me experiencing it. You can see him in the background. It looks like I fell asleep, but that is actually the point where the ridiculousness of this spectacle caused me to descend into another plane of existence. In a private, furnished alcove, tucked into the corner of an already exclusive restaurant, we find ourselves in a haberdashery of flatware and crystal, greeted by a sommelier who pours us all a sweet aperitif and welcomes us aboard this evening's culinary adventure. 6 courses, each with accompanying wine pairings, expertly explained by our hosts and prepared by the chef. Welcome to the chef's table. First, a lovely scallop carpaccio sliced razor thin and dressed with a yuzu vinaigrette. The sweetness of the scallop paired with a crisp Italian Pinot Grigio. Our server informs us that these scallops were flown in from Japan, which seemed a strange choice considering some of the best scallops in the world can be found about 1,000 miles closer on Prince Edward Island, or a few miles away off the Alaskan coast. But these were tasty nonetheless. This, however, would be the high point. Next, a smoked tomato soup paired with a California Sauvignon Blanc that would bring out the sweetness of the tomatoes. This course divided the room, and I fell on the side of it not being very good. For the simple reason that if you take a tomato, accentuate its sweetness while adding notes of smokiness, and then blitz it into a soup, what you've effectively made is an all-natural barbecue sauce. And I'm not all that keen on slurping down a bowl of barbecue sauce. That also blew out my palate as we moved on to a Maine lobster salad with cilantro, pineapple, and vanilla vinaigrette, paired with a much tartar Sauvignon Blanc from New Zealand. A much better pairing and a step back in the right direction. Unfortunately, things got ugly quickly. Next was a fillet of roasted bronzino with a crispy skin and roasted veggies, topped with a lemon confit and finished with pesto, paired with a fruity Chardonnay from Monterey, California. This was all a lovely concept on paper that was let down by execution. The bronzino, an extremely delicate fish with a subtle flavor, had been both overcooked and masked by accoutrements. It's a fish that's expensive due to its rarity, not because it possesses bold flavors. And the flavor of bronzino doesn't stand a chance against something like pesto, and once you overcook it to the point that the crispy skin takes on the texture of a kitchen sponge, the game has been lost. On to our next course in a nail in the meal's coffin. At the start of the festivities, our server proudly announced that this meal would culminate in a filet mignon, but also boasted that it would be 6 ounces rather than 3. At the time, we were elated, but by the time course number 5 arrived, the reaction most of us had was, yeah, 3 would have been more than enough. And so it came, 6 ounces of seared filet, topped with a bordelaise and served with asparagus and truffled mashed potatoes. No one, and I mean no one at this table, greeted this hunk of meat with anything but a look that screamed, "Dear God, I'm full." And so we tucked in and found an array of curious temperatures, which was strange since most everyone ordered it medium rare. Mine was cooked perfectly fine and nicely seasoned, but the bordelaise was far too loose, like it wasn't mounted properly, and lacked the depth found in a true, rich, shalloty bordelaise. This was academic anyway, since the truffled potatoes have been absolutely hammered with truffle oil, which, again, I'm not opposed to in theory, but here it was applied with an almost drunken abandon, its pungent aroma seeping into and overwhelming everything else on the plate. But my main issue here wasn't what was served, but how it contributed to the culmination of the meal itself. Here we were, a dozen people who had been collectively served 72 ounces of beef, seared somewhat to our liking, and we all just sat there, sipping an oaky Cabernet from Napa Valley, occasionally forcing another mouthful down, with the knowledge that most of this food would be going into a trash can. Or at least that's what I thought. I know that makes me sound like a bleeding heart whatever, but the bottom line is, it doesn't feel great. Our ship lurches into Canadian waters off the coast of Victoria. And now would be a good time to point out that since the boat is no longer in international waters, something interesting happens. The casino, as well as many of the onboard shops, close, because a boat must follow the gambling laws or taxation practices of whatever jurisdiction it is currently in. In essence, a cruise ship is operating under its own law, or international law as it were, which got me thinking, how does that work for the employees? And the answer is that a cruise ship never has to follow U.S. labor laws, regardless of where they are. That the ship sails under the flag of countries with relaxed labor laws where, say, working 70 hours a week is considered normal. But stop and consider that for a moment, because what that means is we don't have legal protections in place for the thousands of people from poorer countries working aboard these ships. But we do have legal protections so local governments aren't deprived of tax revenue. So as I'm sitting on a pristine deck that Samjeet has just swept around to ensure none of us encounter a speck of dirt, I can't think of anything besides, man, we suck. But hey, there's always Johnny Rockets for some of their rad-tastical burgers and shakes, bro. Apparently Johnny Rockets are everywhere, and I couldn't precisely tell you why I've never been to one, but after spending several days subsisting on cruise ship mediocrity that has no actual reason to be anything but middling, the thought of a brand name with something to lose sounded promising. And in spite of the fact that, 1, I think burgers as a culinary genre are entirely overrated, and 2, I think smash burgers are especially overrated, Johnny Rockets far outstriped my expectations. Like a diamond hiding among those plastic craft gems at Hobby Lobby, Johnny Rockets serves up a damn fine burger, well seasoned, nicely charred from edge to edge, on a soft potato roll without a hint of pretension, and it filled me with hope as our journey reached its end. My final day began with my now typical morning walk and sit to gaze on the Pacific waters that do their dance and the people that do the same. I'm still fixated on the staff, what their life is like, and why I find myself struggling to enjoy my vacation like a normal person. And I don't have any answers. Maybe it's a me problem. Like I feel that just a couple weeks away from work, being treated with hospitality are things I just don't deserve. Or maybe I think that having to babysit and clean up after 4,000 tourists is a fate worse than what anyone deserves. I think about how I'll step off this cruise ship and feel a sense of relief, to not be continually smiled at and thanked by people who live several decks beneath me and don't get to go home. But before that can happen, there's one thing that we all need to do. We need to step into the Jamie Oliver Thunderdome. I don't know Jamie Oliver and don't keep up with many television food personalities, but Jamie apparently has been one for some time. As far as I can tell, he came from a well-to-do family of restaurateurs, whose establishments he worked in for a time before leaving to work at another one, and immediately, almost suspiciously, become a celebrity, hosting TV shows and writing cookbooks at 22. He's managed to become unliked by many in the industry and on the internet, including a comedian who never seems to stop talking about it. But the only thing he's done to earn my ire, as far as I can tell, is being a strong advocate for a sugar tax in the UK in order to fight childhood obesity. Not that I'm an ardent supporter of childhood obesity, I just think that a wealthy person using their fame and platform to tax the lower and working classes, while enriching the government even further, might not be the most productive way of tackling the issue. I mean, everyone hated the idea of the government taxing them for not making the dietary decisions that Jamie wants them to, but what's important is that Jamie and the government knows what's best for your family. We step into Jamie's Italian by Jamie Oliver, and are led past a table of Jamie Oliver's cookbooks and seated directly across from a television playing a 2-minute loop of Jamie Oliver preparing Italian dishes. So you don't forget that this was all designed by Jamie Oliver. We're handed our menus, but our server let us know that tonight was going to be a little different. I don't know if this is customary, if there's some sort of procedure for when the cruise is about to end, but our waiter informed us that we would choose our entree, but for our appetizers, he was just going to bring us a bit of everything. Like they had to get rid of it anyway, so you take this shit. But this is where our story finds a twist ending, because despite Jamie Oliver seeming to be a world-class twat, despite him being on the television 5 feet away flashing that stupid smile as he, for some reason, tosses a cinnamon stick into a bolognese, the food was pretty damn tasty. A selection of cured meats and cheeses, including a surprisingly good mortadella, and a decent, albeit too sweet focaccia. I wanted to pull my hair out at seeing a Thai sweet chili sauce on an Italian meat and cheese board, but it kinda worked. Black truffle and mozzarella arancini, which will thankfully be the last time I consume truffle oil on this trip. Then the pasta course, and although this was nowhere near the best bolognese, it was far from the worst. Needed at least 20 more cranks of black pepper, Jamie. Then the mains, featuring a chicken parm that, again, far from great, much further from bad. A braised short rib served over gremolata, again, not great, but still good. Italian cuisines feature some world-class braised short ribs, so the inclusion of crispy kale and pickled onions, while tasty, felt strange in the context of an Italian restaurant. But we entered Jamie's Italian hoping to tear it to shreds, and instead found it to be shockingly good, or perhaps just what we needed. After not having seen each other in a few years, we sat and laughed at the TV showing non-stop Jamie, and enjoyed the sort of meal we could share and be together and enjoy each other's company. As the boat returned to where our journey began, and we returned sadly to our separate lives across the country. There are few things, I wonder, that are as mad, incomprehensible, and bewildering as a cruise ship. A metal cauldron teeming with a bit of Vegas, a dash of Disneyland, and a heaping serving of Dollar General. If you were to show this to the long-dead souls who served as the architects for what we know civilization to be, I genuinely wonder if they would reconsider what they were building. But, as with all travels, large or small, it is only as good as the company you keep. And in that regard, I would consider this adventure a string of memories I shall cherish forever.